This is Artist to Art. I'm Aaron Jack. Welcome. Welcome. We're going to have Stacy Gibboni on here. And welcome to everybody. That's what we're doing. We are going to go live. We're live. Welcome. Welcome. Hey, there you go. You got it.
Maybe came to join.
Oh.
Say hi.
Ooh.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
I'm there for right now, huh?
What's your name?
It's a boy, maybe.
What's his name?
Maybe is his
Maybe.
name. Maybe Stacy will figure out which button to press on this Instagram thing. Maybe not.
But maybe she did. But maybe Stacy did. I like that. How did maybe get his name?
Exactly that. He sort of showed up, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to keep him or not. So I said, maybe you belong to the neighbor, maybe you don't, etc., etc. Venice is famous for their cats. So
Yeah.
he was a gift from the street. It's very pretty.
Wow.
Anyway, dear, let's
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
art.
Talk about art. Yeah. Tell me how. So tell me, you're in Venice. Tell me what's happening. What's happening there? How has quarantine been? What's happening with art?
Like, let's not ever go back to quarantine. Yet they just were talking about that on the news today at lunch. So it was tough, man. Venice was really hard. Our quarantine, I mean, everywhere around the world, people are suffering, and everyone. I hate when people say we're all in the same boat, because we're not in the equal balanced boat. Everybody's country, city, town, lifestyle, economic status depends on what kind of boat you're in, right? Sorry for a lot of boat metaphors living on an island.
No, you're in Venice. I mean, I think that's a pretty good.
And here we had a very strict quarantine. It was well over 40 days. There was a lot of irony about, being someone who's lived here for such a long time, and living in a place that originated the concept of quarantine. Never would have thought I'd find myself in that scenario, right? But we couldn't even walk farther than 200 meters outside of our house for the majority of that long quarantine. So it was very, very restrictive, our process. And I know everywhere it's different. But in Italy in general, we are in sort of like a mini lockdown right now, just starting this week. It is absolutely against the law to be outside of your house without a mask. Before, it was just entering into shops and things, like it was a little more flexible, and it's not anymore. So they're giving out fines if you're out and about without a mask on. We're the Italians. We're very pro mask wearing. In different regions of the country, like I live in Venice, on the island, but in the region of Veneto, like you're in Pennsylvania, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like in every state, every region of the country has different rules and regulations within its region, on top of whatever the country has decided. Basically the same thing as in the States. Our governor here is pretty clear and organized and direct, and he's not messing around. So now the restaurants that did reopen have to close at 11 p.m. and there's like a sort of like a curfew, I guess you'd call it, from 11 to 5. That's just started this week or tonight. What? No, Thursday. Maybe it starts on Thursday.
Do you have to be inside, or what?
Yeah, I mean, like they've even the new decreto, the new law is supposed to be like a 2-week run. They just are trying to. The numbers started shooting up as they projected with the fall season, the weather change, that sort of thing, and so they're just trying to put a little stamp down on it. It's that social thing when people go out and everything that happens after dark, I guess.
Right.
They're trying
Right.
to cut
Everything that
that
happens
back
after the
so that they can keep schools open, right? Because they want to keep the schools open. So I don't know. We're giving it a try. It's
Wow.
scary. It's a global scary thing that we're
Right.
all
We're all
living.
going through something together, but
Yeah.
but all in every region in its own way.
Yeah, right. Each individual has their own story.
Mhm.
you know, each culture has their own way of reacting to it. We're learning that because we can be connected so easily through this technology, not like, you know, plagues in the past, not like the early plagues of Venice. Why the island used to quarantine. I mean, in reality, I feel fortunate that I live in such a place where the government is so very on top of it. You know, I'm I'm really pleased to know. I don't always like what they're telling me to do, but we are all cooperating. Italians always put family first. And I think that's really a big part of how things have unraveled over here.
Interesting. Wow. So how has that like played into like the old Venice like quarantine? Like what is that? Because you're talking about this history of Venice and quarantine.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an island anyway, right? So it's easy technically to isolate the island. We didn't have a total complete lockdown in the sense. I mean, it was a complete lockdown, but I guess not like in the old days where, you know, literally the idea of the gates would be closed and no ships would come in or anything. We still had some transport moving around, so that's different. But I guess the thing in terms of contemporary times, what we Venetians now, you know, I consider myself a Venetian having lived here for such a long time, is we're getting to experience the city without the mass tourism, like the over tourism that this particular city has experienced, like so many cities around the world that are port cities that are, you know, are some kind of eclectic or unique environment where this sort of global tourism has been spawned from, you know, again, technology and the ease to hit the button on booking.com and hit the button on Delta and voila, you're there, right? So that the new world order has made travel so easy that we've seen around the world that global impact to the environment specifically, you know, not just the overcrowding, that overcrowding of human beings on the street, on these ancient beautiful streets. It's frustrating for the Venetians to experience that, but it also says a lot about our humanity in general. And this city has suffered a lot under this mass tourism. That being said, it's a place that has built itself on the creativity of its inhabitants, and it needs tourists to survive in a certain sense. It's a merchant's island, right? People came here to trade in the ancient times. It started with salt, and boat building, but it's a part of the culture here. So there has to be a way to find some sort of sustainable tourism for the city and for all cities that suffer under this type of situation. I think the situation really depends on the way we react as humans to the idea of the climate crisis. The climate, you know, it's just as important as the plague that we're all living. But I noticed that we don't talk about it as much because we're also consumed with not being able to go to, you know, the bar or wherever.
Wow.
Right.
And the climate is particularly impacted Venice, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I know we've made a lot of international news in the past few weeks because they have tested the MOSE. Uh, I like to refer to it as the dam because the whole time I've lived here, it's never worked until now. So it's sort of exciting to see that all that uh, investment, that financial investment of the country that went into building it they finally decided to turn it on and it worked, and that was great. And then there was this moment of, but where's the water? Right? You think about all the years of cleaning and dealing with the water, you know, it's a part of the lifestyle. We live in the water. It's a choice that we make. And so we adapt to it. And everyone's home and business is adjusted to a situation where you don't necessarily live on the ground floor. You have everything raised, etc. I live on the first floor, but part of my studio is on the ground floor. So when we had the Aqua Grande of 2019, I suffered a lot of damage and had electricity for several months, things like that. And it's the cleaning, because you have to, every time the tide comes in, you get wet, and every time it goes out, when it's exceptionally high, in other words, you have to clean for days sometimes just to make sure that it's a sanitary situation, right? So when the tide was supposed to come in a couple weeks ago, it was like 10 days ago at 135 centimeters. There was the normal preparations that you would do, you know, the extra couple little things that you would do to make sure to not have too much trouble in your in the house, and the waiting, and then the bells. There's the sirens that ring,
Oh,
so the
really?
anxiety, and then there's the shopkeepers who still, you know, shopkeepers and restaurants who have suffered so bad, and not a lot of places have closed. They haven't been able to get back on their feet from the high water. Then the cancellation of the carnival because of the virus, and then of course the lockdown. So there was this real sort of strange sensation in the air of, are they, is it going to work? You know, they're testing it. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And then the water never came. Then we got an announcement. It worked. It worked. You know, so you sort of had this letdown of, oh, I don't have to clean all day tomorrow. Or I don't know how to explain it, but I know a lot of local people have felt the same thing that I have felt. And that is this sort of, we don't want the water to overtake our lives, but the water is a part of our lives. So the idea that something that was constructed to help save the city has been such a political, corrupt nightmare for almost 30 years, it's sort of a relief to know that it works, but it also makes me feel slightly angry that all those other times that I had problems with my business, or, you know, days of my life and income lost because of the high water and no help from the town, you sort of feel like, well, why didn't they just fix it before?
Mm.
No, there's that sort of thing. And I'm really excited that there are so many local organizations that are pushing out the international message. And I know, I'm sure, you know, my personal opinion is that the international eye on the city puts the powers that be under pressure to make sure that they turn the machine on, now that we know it works, right?
Wow. So what does this machine actually do for everybody who doesn't
It's a
know?
dam. It's a gigantic dam. So it blocks the sea from coming into the lagoon, so that, you know, water here in Venice comes up from underneath. It's not like a tidal wave. You know, in your mind you might imagine it like rolling in the sea. Of course the sea is rising due to the global warming, but it comes from underneath. So this whole city is built on cypress tree trunks. Little mud flats, let's say, are built up over the centuries, and the properties were there. So when the water comes up, it comes up from underneath. So there's little holes in the paving stones where you can see the water bubbling up as the tide comes up. So this dam that's out in the lagoon between the Adriatic Sea and the lagoon helps to keep the water from surging when there's the specific high tides due to weather and the full moon.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the full moon really affects Venice and
Yeah. Because
interesting.
the moon affects all tides, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
So
a global phenomena.
yeah, it's interesting, just like you pay attention particularly to like cycles of moon because it
Yeah,
affects how the tides are affecting your daily life.
exactly. Exactly. I've always been pretty passionate about the moon, but definitely living here brings it home. It is a part, you know, of something that you pay closer attention to.
Right. Because it's like, oh, am I going to lose business because the moon is doing
Right.
the thing that it does?
Well, and it's sort of like, you know, folks who live in hurricane, you know, the America's been hit really hard this year by all these terrible storms. Again, the climate is relate, you know, causing that. It's not just like, oh, we had a bad year. I mean, let's pay attention, folks. This is all, it's all related. It's not unrelated one thing from another. So I think it's important that we concentrate on the type of impact that we have as individuals on the environment. Obviously, we're way late to the game. You know, some of us were annoying children and at home who were always making our parents recycle. You know, others are throwing their Coca-Cola can in the street. No, so we have to try to really emphasize that. So if the international eye can stay on problem areas that are really visible, like Venice and its high water, if we can remind people that it's not just some fluke thing, it has the reason the waters are higher now than they were 21 years ago when I first got here is because of the global warming full stop. That's the situation. Why are there so many more storms that hit America? These hurricanes, why were they stronger? Why were they all headed in the same direction? My daughter lives in New Orleans. They were, it's been a pretty stressful time for all those residents of Louisiana. Let's pay attention to the fact that it has a direct connection to the global climate situation. It's not just some fluke bad season, right?
Right. So let's talk about the art.
So the art.
What's going on around you? What's this art going on around you?
I paint a lot of pictures of the moon.
Okay,
No,
perfect.
somebody wrote to me the other day something about me painting nature. I don't paint nature, I don't paint nature. I paint my experience with nature. I'm inspired by nature. I'm inspired by the water around me and trees and the beach and nature in general. It's I guess, Aaron, I'm one of those 20th century artists, earlier I said to you, I'm struggling with the social media platform. I'm trying to embrace it because it's amazing. It's a great gift for people in our visual field. But I am one of those old school kind of gals who really believes that my life is art. Art is my life. I don't separate the situation. So I consider myself multidisciplinary because I'm not just a painter, but I primarily paint. And the quarantine definitely had me painting all the time. And like most 19th and 20th century artists, I enjoy my studio time. I've always enjoyed staying in my studio. My friends know I hate to answer the telephone, and I, I'm happy to be isolated by myself in my studio. So I don't suffer from that type of problem that many people have experienced. It's not, I don't have any trouble finding something to do in my studio per se, but I've found that the pandemic has drawn me back to my writing a little bit more. I write as well. And I did write, gave myself a project called the Red Zone Essays during the quarantine period, where I was using Facebook as my platform to share my experiences with what was happening in the city. And I found that was interesting for me to do because I don't usually share my writing in that fashion. So that was interesting. I can't hear you.
Back on. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Reply in the comments. Please. Please reply in the comments. What is happening? We're coming back. We're coming back. You can hear me. Oh, we're good. We're back.
Good. Sorry.
No. This is the new age of technology.
That was smart. I went down my rabbit hole and you just cut off my volume. That was good, man.
I think the world is learning. I've heard the world is learning about this. I don't know how to. No. So what's going on in the artwork around you?
Well, yeah, I don't have great light in this room at night.
Mm-hmm.
This is this is my studio space in the daytime. The light
Mm-hmm.
comes from the west, so it's nice and balanced. So I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, you can take us off the
That
whatever.
work?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that one?
Yeah.
These are works in progress. So this is sort of a harvest crescent moon. It's not finished yet. It's got some foliage going on there. And this is another one that's not finished yet. It's a moonrise over the lagoon. This one is dived in here for you just because I figured one finished one might be good. I was saying that I don't paint nature. I paint my experience with nature. So they're all oil paintings. I paint with oils. Some of them are inspired by poetry. Some of them are inspired by being in the garden. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Daily life experiences basically is what I'm inspired by. Um, I've always been very fascinated with the relationship of color and the colors that we see in life and how we interpret it. Everybody sees something different, right? Oh, that you have an image up. Yeah, it looks blurry. That's that's the milk moon rising, very blue. Those are pretty big. I prefer to work in a large format. I've tried to become more practical in the past few years. Not everybody has large walls.
Especially in Venice, or just you find that in
I
general?
just find in general. No, yeah, in general.
Henriette asked, "Who are your influences?"
It's a good question. Today or no?
Both,
um,
both.
in,
Today, and general and art
in
and
general,
not.
again, I think my influences are multidimensional too, not just painters, right? Again, I think that we all have uh, ways of viewing the world, and I view it more. I guess I try to view it holistically and see how things are connected. Um, like as a young woman, I was fascinated by the first time I ever heard a symphony play Vivaldi. That was definitely like mind blowing for me. Surely a foreshadowing of coming here to the city and staying. Um, love Helen Frankenthaler as a painter. Gauguin is a colorist. Joseph Albers is another colorist. Um, Jenny Holzer, conceptual work. Uh, I was rereading something the other day. Daniel Burin, the conceptual artist, the French conceptual artist, had written a beautiful short piece about I think it was called The Function of the Studio. Don't hold me to the title. I believe it's called. Have you ever read that?
I haven't, but maybe someone in the comments has.
It's from the 1970s. He's a concept. He's the man who is pretty famous for the stripe paintings. Do you know who I mean? Daniel
I think
Byrne.
so.
He also wrote about the artist practice, and I'll try to find. I think the title is The Function of the Studio, and I was rereading that, thinking about how happy I am to be in my studio, how fortunate I am to finally have created a space that is really ideal for my live work situation. And how when you bring people into the studio, it's a real you're letting, the process of letting someone into your place of practice, because painting is a practice. There's a rhythm to it, and when you bring people in, like being anxious about talking to you today, because I'm bringing you into my space. We're not just entering into a gallery space or the museum and seeing the piece on the wall and observing it as a viewer removed. When you go into an artist's studio, whether it be for one of these newfangled virtual visits or for a traditional in-person visit, you're really seeing the whole process. The paint splots on the floor, the sketchbooks, the post-it notes on the door, right? It's a
Do you
whole.
want to show us some post-it notes on the
No,
doors of?
no, I don't want you to see the things I have to do. I already ripped off your post-it note because I did my job for you already.
Or do you want to show us a sketchbook? Do you want to show us part of a sketchbook?
They're in the other room, I think. Here's
You can
one.
go get them.
Here's one sketchbook.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I write a lot too. In the sketchbooks. Did I not? I didn't send you any pictures. I didn't send you any sketchbook pictures. I sent you a post-it note picture, I think.
I think you sent me one, but I don't have it.
During the I don't know, I just do some drawings. During the lockdown, when I was writing the Red Zone essays, I I started to write things on Post-it notes, and I started putting them above my work table, and they sort of extended down the hallway. Sort of thoughts to help keep me organized. Years ago, I did a project called Define Me in 1,000 Words or More, and it was because becoming bilingual by accident and not actually studying the Italian language formally, I found that I was becoming more and more inarticulate in English. I felt like I was speaking like a first grader in Italian. I'm pretty sure I still do speak like a first grader in Italian, but people let me slide after all this time. And then I found that my vocabulary was becoming limited also in English. So I spent like a year making 5,000 drawings that had words on them, and these yellow Post-it notes that happened again during the lockdown reminded me of that project. That project sort of helped me focus on my own background as an American living abroad. Right? It's easy to get lost when you live outside of your comfort zone, no matter if it's for a lifetime or a short period of time, and we connect directly to our language, our mother tongue, whatever that is. And I find that, again, with the technology, it's really easy for us to abbreviate everything, forget our punctuation, forget to consider a more creative way to say something, or a more poetic way to say something. So I do that with my work, and so a lot of my sketchbooks are filled with writing just as much as they are with imagery.
Oh,
Are people writing things there, and I can't see it because
Trace just asked, could you tell us something about your the painting in the background?
This one that's finished, this blue sky dreaming one, this one.
Go for it. Whatever you want to tell us about.
Oh, I don't know what to say. I have a terrace where I do a lot of gardening, and when the vines started to come in, I was just sort of laying there on the terrace looking up at the sky through the vines, and this is the painting that came out of that space, you know, the couple months after the experience. So again, I don't paint per se nature, I'm just paint my feelings with nature. I don't know, Aaron, if I can keep my Wi-Fi when I go into this space here, but this is my showroom. It has some of my work. Can you see that?
Yeah. You could go a little bit lower with the camera, I think. Just like a little bit lower. Yeah, there you go.
Can you see that? I'm afraid I'm going to lose you.
Oh, no, you're good.
So there's
Feel
a
free
few
to ask
things
questions in the comments also. Oh, Henrietta, Henrietta's in London. She asked,
Is she coming to visit me?
maybe after the lockdown. How easy is it to exhibit in Italy? How easy?
Oh, that's a good question. So Henrietta, you're an artist as well.
Mm-hmm. She's
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that is so dumbfounded to me is that because of the Biennale, the oldest art biennial in the world, 1895, by the way, the city, it's one of the city's big business things, but it's also a big cultural experience. And so artists from all over the world come and show their artwork here. Most of them are chosen by their country and participate in the main venues. But over the years, private families have opened up their palaces, courtyards, properties, things like this, and people pay a fortune to show their work in these spaces. I never do that, Henrietta. So if you have a gallery, a big gallery that's willing to invest a lot of money, then you can, also show your work during the Biennale. I have done a few projects during the Biennale with local people here. not paying anything for the space because it was local people who wanted to do something. The last thing I did was in Venice was in 2018 during the Italian Film Festival. There's one in Venice and there's one in Rome every year. And one of my friends has a family property that's an old Renaissance palace. And we used the courtyard and had a one-night affair with my paintings in the courtyard. It was really fun. I hired a musician to come to play music from the Renaissance period. We put in plants from the local horticultural co-op. Um, it was nice. It was sort of like, Renaissance courtyards used to be social places for people to meet. You were safe inside the space because the big doors would then close, and you were still felt like you were outside because of the plants, the nature that was brought in from the countryside. And I wanted to sort of reenact that kind of sense in these days, and we had a good time. Plus these pretty big paintings that evoke nature were in the space, so that was a fun time. But if you wanted to rent something like that, Henrietta.
You got to say, so in other words, you got to know some people.
You got to know some people that are willing to do. I mean, that was just a one night event. It wasn't, an exhibition that stayed up. It was an experiential moment, a happening, if you want to date it and call it something like that, if it has to fit into a genre. But technically speaking, most of the exhibitions that you will see here that are in private homes and things like that are going to be by paying to be in them. Obviously, we have the Peggy Guggenheim Museum, the Pinot collection, plus the Biennale venue. This is the best place in the world for contemporary art. I can't think of anything better other than, at this point, Los Angeles or New York City, Paris, Berlin, Miami. These places all have fantastic contemporary exhibitions, but sometimes there's a price tag attached to it, right?
Interesting. So you gotta have the backers, or you gotta have the money yourself.
Yeah.
You're trying to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, galleries invest in that sort of thing. We were mentioning before that the art fair, like the concept of the art fair, that's another, I know it's not that new, but to me, it's still new. I've done it with Saatchi up at the other art fair in London, and it was a really great way to meet other artists. I really enjoyed that part of it, the getting to meet the other artists. But I've never done that type of thing before, and it is an investment in yourself because you do pay for your space, right?
So you were paying for your space in London with Saatchi
Through the other art fair.
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
That's just that sponsors it. So I think it's a really well organized fair. It was great, sold work, enjoy it very much. I made some new friends through the experience, and I think that is something really worthwhile. That being said, to me, it's a new concept. I mean, people who have studied art and have just gotten out of school in the past 5 years, this is probably what they're being trained to do. Then you're going to want to get into this fair right? I'm sure that's the direction, but I was in undergraduate school in the 80s. So, we were still taking slides, and we were, painting big paintings because that's what you did in the 80s. Everything's different. Everything changes constantly with this rapid technology.
Wow. So you're really looking at like this technology changing how we do things in the future.
Oh, I mean, it has changed my life I've got 33 years since the first time I did an exhibition. It's been 33 years. So things have changed a lot in 3 decades, but they've changed the most in the last 8, in the last decade. It's changed most rapidly. I'm trying to keep up with that. I'm not very good at keeping up with it, but I'm trying to embrace using social media platforms because it works. It definitely works. I'm still shocked when someone buys a painting through this type of interaction. I'm thrilled, but I'm still shocked. No, because to me, you need that tactile experience. I'm trying to still understand that it can be done like this, and it is being done like that. I mean, think about all these people that are now, because of the pandemic, I know they existed already, but they're really up in their game. Some of these galleries, the big galleries, creating these virtual gallery experiences and things. That's not like seeing the Hilma Klimt show at the Guggenheim. I mean, you got to go and see that stuff in person for me to feel it.
Hmm. So how is it to feel art behind the screen for you?
I feel detached sometimes from it. You know, I I was saying to you, I'm enjoying learning about Instagram specifically because I like getting in contact with some of these artists I met at the fairs, um, and seeing who they are interested in looking at, and then following that line and see, oh wow, this is very interesting to see how people are working and how people are using this platform to share their work. It's fantastic. I'm not against it. I'm just not good at using it yet, right? I'm full disclosure. I'm got a big learning curve here. Um, I think that there is something so important about experiencing art, no matter what, if it's music or the tactile experience of holding a book and laying in the sunshine and reading. That is something that I don't want to give up as things evolve.
So the experience of nature, because that seems what your work is, you're talking about in your work. We have some quick questions. We're gonna do some quick questions.
Okay, that's better.
How do you, yeah, and then we're gonna look through some of your work. So we have like a minute or two. How do you see from Andrea? How do you see your old paintings now? Your older paintings.
My older paintings,
Mm-hmm.
like older paintings from 30 years ago.
It's up to you to interpret the questions as you
Andrea,
like.
what do you mean?
No. Interpret
Uh,
it.
interpret the question. Okay.
Interpret the question as you like.
Well, like I believe that every artist has their own iconography. You work a lot with music, right, Aaron? So you're interpreting music and the expression of how you're feeling intuitively with the music, with your lines, correct? So I believe that each mark you're making is part of your iconography, and as it evolves over the next 30 years of your life, you'll be able to look back and see what it is. For me, nature has always been a part of, I mean, I was the little girl hiding under the trees, smelling the honeysuckle, digging up the onions and making mud pies under the pine trees. You know, those are sensory experiences that have never left me. I enjoy playing in the soil, playing in the dirt. I still like to do that, even though I live in a city of water. So my early paintings in the 90s, for example, were a lot of sunsets. Painted my first moon way back then too, you know, not including those ones from childhood, but the sunset paintings, the horizon lines, forest, trees, the marshes and things. These images that I've sent you, they look really blurry to me.
They
So I
might be
probably sent them to
clearer
your
for the
phone.
viewer.
Okay, that makes me feel better. So
They
I
should go to
say
your
that,
page. If you're not following one of us, go follow us.
okay, yes, please. It's much clearer on the page. So yeah, my early work, I think, was still based. I haven't veered away from my use of color. I'm very passionate about a colorful palette. It brings me joy, and I don't want to do anything that doesn't bring me joy. I don't want to waste time, precious time, doing things that make me unhappy. Life is filled with so much stress, and it's so easy to be unhappy. So if I have the option to choose pink, then I want to choose pink.
Good answer. It's a good answer. So what's going on here? Let's quickly look through. We have about 15 minutes left, so let's look through some of your work here. Just tell me what's going on.
All right. What are you showing me? That first one that I'm looking at that looks blurry, a little worried about that, Aaron,
I don't know.
is
Well, tell me everybody
high noon.
down below if it's blurry. How about that?
No, I'm seeing hearts, so I don't know. That's a High Noon Lagoon painting. When quarantine was over, I was very fortunate to be able to go on a couple boat rides. So I was really inspired about being out on the boat and feeling the marsh. How I know there was a lot of photographs about alligators and things in the canal and stuff. Didn't see any of that crazy Photoshop work here live and in person in the city, but definitely more birds were out about the lagoon and in the trees here close to the studio, in all that silence, the lack of all the tourists and the lack of the motors in the canal. The silence really brought out the birds. And being out on the lagoon, I think there's a really beautiful sense of being directly in contact with the origins of this man-made place. Because I live in a man-made place. Like all cities are man-made, but there's something very different about asphalt and brick as opposed to the water that is our streets here.
That's so interesting. The water that's your streets. That's
Yeah. But I'm not sitting around painting blue water, right? Oh, that was the first day that they called for the lockdown. Venice went into lockdown 3 or 4 days before the rest of the country. Venice and Veneto region and the Lombardia region went in to the lockdown before the rest of the country. And I had an appointment that day and I was out. So as I was coming home, I made it a point to walk through San Marco, Piazza San Marco, the most famous piazza in Europe, maybe in the world. And that's what it looked like on March the 3rd. And that was really mind-boggling to me. I mean, there was barely any pigeons even there. It was just shockingly empty. There was that eerie sense to it, and it really inspired me to write about how I was feeling in those first 50 days or so. If you want
wow.
to read Red Zone essays, some of them are more poetic than others. Some of them are straightforward, solitude angst being expressed, and some are more poetic in their delivery. But if you go to my Facebook page, artist Stacy Gibboni, I think it's studio at Stacy Gibboni, something like that, you can scroll back to March and read them if you like.
We have a question
Yeah.
from 789 here. What does making art mean to you?
It's just who I am, Aaron. I don't differentiate waking up in the morning and putting on my art hat or putting on my mom hat or putting on my friend hat or anything. It's just who I am. I came to grips with that a long time ago. It's not separate from who I am. So it means everything to me. It is my existence. How I express myself is my existence. I don't feel like I'm expressing myself very well tonight, but we should have talked earlier in the day. I'm kind of a sunrise, sunset kind of gal. So these are junkyard essays. This is an image, a photograph in the 1990s. I did a whole series of color photographs on 35 millimeter film with my old Minolta. And I had access to a family junkyard. Pop Gibboni let me into the junkyard to take photographs, and it was really a wonderful experience for me. And these photographs were transferred into digital format to print them in large scale format for a few exhibitions that I've done. One was at the 798 district in Beijing. One was in Padova here in Italy. And another show, a small show I did during the Biennale in Venice. And another show of the same project, the Junkyard Essays, in at the Red Line Art Center in Milwaukee. The junkyard essays are reflections about waste, time, moments. A car accident happens in a moment, everything changes. How we have over our history dealt with the remains of those vehicles and those pieces of production, and how that has affected the environment is something I've reflected a lot about in my life. And these photographs and the accompanying essays tried to make a connection to share, so that we could maybe be a little bit more conscious about the moments, and to connect that thread through my career of how art makes me feel. Those red zone essays, I specifically chose the title. It mimics my thoughts about when I was creating the junkyard essays many years ago. And now I transitioned from the writing, because I felt that it didn't need to go on, and can't share every single word, with the social media platform, every thought. So I started taking these video stills, these little short videos with the iPhone. They're called Moments, a Venetian view of daily life. And when I do go out, I stop for a moment here or there, and I capture a little bit of what's happening without moving the camera around. Just, whatever catches my attention. And I'm enjoying that very much. But my point of doing them is not only for me to have that moment to observe, but to share with people that possibility to observe, and to maybe take an extra moment to really think about what they're seeing.
Mm. We're taking that moment right now.
There's another one. How many of you had a phone like that? I put that one in on purpose because I figured we'd be talking on this cell phone in this live video experience. But I don't know, in 1999, I took a photograph of a wrecked car in a junkyard in Jersey, and that telephone was, the car phone sitting on the seat in a very lush mobile that got crushed.
Wow. Wow.
Those are the Post-it notes from the red zone essays. They just kept going down the hallway. I've always thought that Italian houses have this really obsolete, ridiculously useless, long extended hallways as part of their design. And I have one in the flat that I rent. And so it made me feel like it had a use when I did that.
Henrietta asked, how much should we tell the viewer?
How much should we tell the viewer?
Yeah, as I guess as an artist, like how much to tell the viewer about
I
the art?
prefer to tell them nothing, Henrietta. Generally, I prefer to tell them nothing, except in those cases when the painting has come from a poem or come from a written experience. Often I'll write something and then I paint it, or I make a painting and halfway through I'm inspired to write something. In those scenarios, like my Sublunare project, all of those paintings were connected directly to some brief poem, some small connection to a poem. Not that you might understand what that meant anyway, but that's how I felt about it. I prefer that aesthetics is a very personal sensation. What we find beautiful, you don't find beautiful. What I don't find beautiful, et cetera, right? It's not a universal, acceptable thing that this color blue is the perfect blue, but there's something very incredible about putting this shade of blue next to this shade of orange at the right moment in the right shape with the right line that can make me so happy that I don't need to do anything else for the rest of the day, right? So do I have to tell the viewer that? I don't think so. That was for me. But if the final piece brings joy to someone else, that's the greatest compliment that we can have as artists. I think it's our job as artists to help people see things in a way of to find beauty. If there has to be a message, that's great too, if that's what you're going for, if you're trying to give that a specific message. To me, at this point in my life, I just want to help people see things maybe in a different light than they generally would, and that if my work can bring them some form of happiness, that's all I can ask for.
Hmm.
Somebody wrote like Pollock. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
not inspired by Pollock at all. uh, Lee Krasner, she was a good painter. Um, that's my palm tree. It's too dark for you to see it tonight, but that is, it's not my palm tree. It's the palm tree that is outside of my windows. This is a really tall ceiling. You see my ceiling?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a the windows are, the building is from the 1400s, and so the windows face onto a neighbor's courtyard where that palm tree stands. And when you think about Venice, do you think of palm trees?
Not sure I do.
Yeah, you
Not
shouldn't, because
generally.
it's not
No.
generally something that should be here. But that is a majestic tree that I'm fortunate to have as my muse, as my company every day. I take a lot of short videos and photographs of it over the last 13 years that I've been in this space. And so someday I would like to exhibit them throughout the seasons, rainstorms, hailstorms, sunshine, birds nesting. It's a really incredible tree.
Oh.
That is the ginkgo, a ginkgo experience. Henrietta, I did write about that experience in my Sublunare series, of which this painting was a part of. Ginkgo trees are amazing. These ancient trees that have so much to teach us. And there is a very beautiful one in the cloister of the Santo Spirito Church in Florence, Italy. And I was there one day, and the trees generally like lose the leaves all at once, or like all within a 2 to 3 day period, and they just sort of float down like gold. It's amazing. And I had that experience with this tree, and I found it pretty special.
Wow. I think we have like maybe 4 or 5 minutes left, so just so you know. So if we want to.
Okay. This is Sublunare Sphere. That painting is in the other room. Actually, it's about 2.5 by 3 meters, I think. It's one of the Moon Muse paintings. Like you said earlier, I'm really inspired by the cycles of the moon and its connection to our daily life here in Venice, but in general, also as a woman, I think we have a tendency to be a little bit more in tune to the moon. And this particular painting is a very thin stain on a cotton duck canvas. Sometimes I like to work like that. I don't always, traditionally you gesso your surfaces, right? But I've gone through different periods in my practice where I've left the canvas completely raw, and I've done a lot of drawing and then straight oil painting with no primer. I've done other things like this, which was a really thin staining technique. So it's oil paint always, but it's very thin compared to some of the other paintings that maybe I would have done in the 90s, for example. Somebody asked about the work from the 90s. That was very thick. I worked with a lot of thick paint back then. I sent you this picture because people seem to always like to see photographs of how you get around in the city. So I told you about that one night experience we had a couple years ago, and these are some friends of mine, the DeMarco brothers, who build stretchers. just like their father and uncle did for Peggy Guggenheim, actually. These guys are in the same business where they build the heavy wooden stretchers. And on occasion, they'll help me out. And so they brought their boat over and we took the paintings just a few blocks down by boat. And that's my Kale out near my house.
Wow. So you're just like you're shipping your paintings around by boat. That's
It's
gotta come
fun.
with like a couple like moments where you're like, oh my God, my paintings are so close to water.
One that it wasn't this trip, but it was in the show I had in I don't remember if it was the Treviso or Padova. I don't remember, but these guys had a bigger boat and they came by. Everything was bubble wrapped and whatnot. This was real close, so we just put blankets between the paintings before we took them over. The painting that's leaning up against the wall actually lives out in Washington State now. Anyway, the best part of the show for me years ago for this other exhibition was riding on the boat with the paintings down to meet the truck on the mainland so we could get them out to the mainland. That was fun. Oh, this photograph is from this is down in San Marco near the Piazza, and I don't know if you can see there's a seagull in the image. I was trying to capture the light for one of the photographs for my red zone essays. It was just really quiet. It was the day after we were released from our strict quarantine. It was around my birthday time, so I took myself for a walk and wanted to compare how the city looked in that 45 days later or whatever it was, and I wanted the picture without the seagull. The seagull wouldn't move, so I think I sent you also a video.
Yeah,
It
this
was
is the video right here.
oh, it is okay. So
Hmm.
this is the first moments of me patiently waiting for the seagull to get out of the shot because the light was so good. And so this is when I just on the walk home, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to start doing these videos. I'm going to stop writing about it and just concentrate on the watching. And there goes the seagull. I had to clip it for you. I didn't want it to be too long. But you see the beautiful light reflecting underneath the bridge.
Hmm.
This is a close-up of the painting Aqua Alta Beaver Moon. It's the painting that I had started on the morning of the Aqua Grande, the high water of November 2019 that was so horrendous. The night before, we knew we were going to have high water. We had no idea it was going to be that high, so there was that anxiety of coming. So I put up a blank canvas on the studio wall, and I just started painting the next morning. I painted that piece through that 10-day period. The biggest problem of the Aqua Grande was that the tides did not recede as they usually did. The water stood longer than normal. Usually with any type of tide, it comes in and goes out, comes in and goes out. But it was so much water, it wasn't going out. And so that's where the real damage occurred for the city. And it happened 3 times after we had the really high, and then we had high water consecutively 2 more times after.
Wow. So this big dam
The
has
big
like
dam that
the
now works,
dam.
has proven to work. So let's just hope that they keep turning it on.
Wow. So they just hadn't turned it on. That's
Well,
so
apparently it wasn't finished, but I don't want to get into the politics
right.
part of it. We only have a couple moments left.
Minutes. Yeah. Here's a little
This is another
video.
one of the moments. This is a secret garden in Cannaregio that I've never been able to see past that gate. So I take a lot of images of that over the years because I'm very curious. I don't know if you can see, or you can go back to my page and look. There's beautiful ornamental like vases on the top of these 2 pillars that mark the gate. The gate is now very contemporary looking, but I'd like to imagine, I'm sure there was a much more elegant gate there once upon a time. But full grown trees, there's a pomegranate that lives there that I can see the fruit on from the other side, and these very beautiful vines that grow during the year.
Wow. So you really just have to leave a note, like a sticky note, like a series of sticky notes.
Please let me in.
I'd love
I
to
figured
paint your garden. and just like in a series of sticky notes.
If I keep taking photos and videos of it, maybe the owners will maybe eventually see it. I don't know the owners or anything. Maybe they'll eventually see it and invite me in. There's a lot of secret gardens in Venice, and I haven't had a chance to see them all, but it's on my to-do list.
Oh, a secret garden tour. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, they exist. The great Tutti San Martini wrote a book. There's a great book about the secret gardens. People do them. This painting is en route to its new collector, actually. It's called Awaiting the Fall, and it's on the road as we speak. Yeah.
Cool.
Hope it gets there safely.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Oh, these are the boys. I had to put this in because, again, it's an island. We don't have any cars. For those of you, I'm not trying to patronize anyone, but sometimes people get really flabbergasted by the fact that we don't have any cars, We don't have any cars here. So see the dolly.
Mm-hmm.
This was, I think, I don't know if that was for the London show or maybe it was the one in Cleveland last year. But these guys have been picking up my artwork with express shipping, I don't know, for 15 years or so up until now. They're grounded right now, so I'm having to go through another, but they always pose for a photo for me. Antonino and Moreno, shout out to them, unemployed. Everybody's unemployed, right?
Wow.
But it takes collaboration to put things together, right? So you've got your artist working in their studio, and the function of that studio, as written by Daniel Byrne, I believe is very accurate, right? That's where all the creativity happens. But the artist is inspired by something, they live in a certain way, and they have relationships and connections and collaborations with other people, whether they're artists or not, that help make the work. So these two guys are just as important to my studio practice as the men who make the paint or the place I buy the wood, right?
Yeah. So what's this book called again for everybody else out there?
No, it's
that you keep referring to.
Yeah, sorry, I keep referring to it because I just reread it for like the 100th time. It's an essay. It's a short essay. I believe it was published in that magazine October. Do they still publish that? I don't even know if it exists anymore. It was an interesting magazine. Daniel Byrne, he's a French artist. He's in his 80s, if I'm not mistaken. He's a conceptual artist, and he wrote about art a lot in the 1970s. And this piece is called The Function of the Studio, I believe.
The Function of the Studio.
Yeah.
For everybody else.
Artist should read it. If you're an artist and you haven't read it, then you're really missing something.
Interesting. So everybody else out there, go read this, find it online, find it on your Google, right? Is that how we find it?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, it should be a free download. That's the Grand Canal. Oh, the Grand Canal, so beautiful. Imagine that all of these palaces were built by wealthy merchants, traveling the world, bringing back interesting objects and things from faraway places. Each palace was sort of built to outdo the neighbor from across the canal.
Wow. Do you see that in like different aspects of it? You're like, oh, they're like copying that.
I never, all these years I've lived here, I've never learned the name of every one of the buildings I've even had people say, oh, but where do you live? Like, what's your address? And such a vague address. It's the same thing with the palaces. I've never been interested in learning who lived where per se. I just like the beauty of these buildings that literally appear to be floating upon the water. I think it's magical.
So for everybody who's watching right now, whoever you're not following right now on Instagram, go follow both of us.
Yes.
That's how it works. I'm going to be back on. I think Instagram sometimes lets us go a little bit over, so it's fine. I'm going to be back on for this is my 59th interview. I'm going to be back on for my 60th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and I guess 9 p.m. Venice time, you're gonna be asleep.
I tried not to get up at 5 a.m., but I just can't help myself.
You know, these things happen.
I think it's called age.
I don't know. You know, time is a very relative thing, I think.
Yeah. But we definitely are learning that with the pandemic, aren't we?
Right? I mean, different times, different places in the world. We're here, like, what's one time and sunrise and moon and different, because they're different where we, different
Right.
places in the world.
The natural time is different than our human time, really. We rush through life. All right. Haven't you
Rush
been
through life.
rushing through life up until March of 2020? Did you think about that for a minute?
It's a strange thing, isn't it? Rushing through life. And how does it feel to not rush through life and
Right.
watch the boats go by, or not boats?
Right. And reflect, and just taking this time to reflect upon it and see what our place is in all of it, right? And to intuitively understand what it is we need to be doing for ourselves to be well.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to invite everybody to take a moment to reflect on that out there. Just reflect on these moments. Feel free to write them in the comments. these,
Oh, Aaron, you gotta come. You're gonna
all
have to
right.
come with it.
Yes, we must come to an end now. We
Okay.
are at our time. So thank you for reflecting with us. I'm Aaron Jack, and this is Artist to Art. How can people find you? Where can they find you?
Here on Instagram, at Stacy Gibboni. On Facebook, artist Stacy Gibboni. I have
Nice.
a page where you can read those red zone essays if you want to go back. Otherwise, I put images of the practice, daily practice.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you everybody who's watching.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
please follow both of us up here or later or down in the comments.
There.
Thank you, Stacy, for joining this day and for sharing all that you have. And if you'd like to leave us with some last words of inspiration, feel free.
I'm inspired by you, Aaron, because I am inspired by all young people who are mastering this technology and reaching out. I mean, what you're doing by inviting me to babble with you tonight was a real kind, courteous gesture of sharing, right? You're sharing your ability, your technology, your viewers with this old chick over here. And I appreciate that. Like our friend Sergio Gomez, super generous man. He is learned how to do things in a particular way, and he is sharing that information. And I think that is, generosity should not be ignored. And I really appreciate your generosity with inviting me. So thank you.
And thank you to Sergio as well for connecting us.
Yeah,
So
he did. Didn't he? Yay, Sergio. He's out there in
and thank
Chicago.
you.
See, we're all over. Sergio's in
We're all
Chicago.
over. The world is connected.
It is. It is. It is. It is. And also, I guess another thing, if I have a moment, let's
Yeah, go
have
for it.
a moment to thank all of those teachers out there in the world. I happen to know an awful lot of school teachers, and man, they are on the front lines dealing with so much more than just teaching our children. And I think it's so important not to underestimate what they are going through to be there for students of all ages all over the world. It's definitely something we have to pay attention to right now and be thankful for them just as much as our healthcare providers. And don't forget to vote.
Yes. Yes. On that note, vote. All
Okay?
right. All right. Till I'll be back on in about 45 minutes or so. So
Excellent. Have a
I'll
wonderful time.
yeah, I'll see you all then. All
I will
right.
watch that tomorrow. Thank you, Aaron.
Excellent. All right.
Thank
Bye.
you. Ciao. Be well.
Ciao.